Hi there, I'm Dani Henderson, spiritualtherapist.com, and he's back. He's back for part 4. It is the very right Reverend Dr. Chris Lemmon. Welcome, Dr. Chris. How are you today?
Excellent.
Excellent.
I think.
It's like, yeah, have you checked? To those of you out there that have never had the honor of sitting with Dr. Chris here, he is a man very much geared to metaphysics and human potential in all its guises. And we've covered several subjects over the last few months in terms of human potential. We've looked at patterns, we've looked at death meditations, we've looked at various things. And today we're going to look at request and demand energy and what that means. So over to you, sir.
Okay, well, let me throw out the idea a little bit, and then we can go into the background from a multitude of different avenues, right? So the premise is that when somebody demands, there's no outlet, the ability to say no to it, and is you will do it, right? And so there's no opportunity then for a potential. Potential is the idea that you can imagine doing something and then move forward and find a way to accomplish that. That's what we're all looking for, is some potential in life. Whatever your story is, it's always just some potential. If you had it now, you wouldn't be thinking about it. So you're imagining it and moving towards it. In a world of demand, then when you can't say no, it may seem like you get a high paid job. It seems like, well, this is a good deal. But then all of a sudden they want you to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, in China, they call the workday a 996. That's 9 to 9, 6 days a week, right? Oh. So well, it might seem horrible to Americans, but 9 to 9, 6 days a week just seems like all of a sudden they feed you. There's an awful lot of things that kind of go on. They have childcare, they have all kinds of things. So it's not so much of a burden, but you can start to see their productivity because they're actually producing a lot more hours than we are to produce that, right? So 996 is kind of a way. They don't perceive that as a demand, right? They see that as a potential opportunity. They got a job, they're making more money than it would be planting soybeans, right? So they're happy campers. So it just depends on the way we look at demands and requests. Sometimes we're in a structure and we're really happy with demands because it seems everybody else is taking care of everything. We don't have to do anything. The 1940s, 50s housewife, it's like everybody's taking care of everything. I don't even have to balance the checkbook, right? So all those things were just simply it was a demand load. You didn't have to say no. Somebody took care of everything, right? But when you start to look at potential, there's no potential in that. If somebody has all the authority, they get to say, you do this, and then you have to do it. You can say no. So with the request, you can say no. Can you convert a demand to a request? Of course, you can convert it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're converting it in a world and a dialogue, because you might have an hard time, especially with someone with the government. But for the most part, can you convert it? When you hear the demand, you start to find the request into there. You start to look at it and say, where's my no? Where is my opportunity to get out of this without a fight, without engagement? Where's my no? What can I do in here? Where can I say no? Where can I say yes? I've had things already where people do something in a job and change the terms after
internet. Sorry, your internet keeps going. I keep losing you. The internet's a bit wobbly.
It may be, but the last time it got a little wobbly and we lost voice. Okay, to me down there, fading out with that.
Yeah, no.
Just yeah.
This is so annoying. Boob tube, bugger off. Zoom interferers. So annoying. Well, what I was going to say about the 9 to 9 in China, I mean, it's great if they're building in childcare and, but I think it's absolutely inhuman for any people to be on this corporate ladder And I was talking to a young person that I mentor earlier today. She's almost 22 and she's going for different positions, and she has to choose whether she works between 7 and 4 or 8 and 5:30. And inside I'm thinking, God, that's awful, awful. I remember when I worked for a real estate agency in Fulham, London, on Fulham Broadway, and it was 9 to 9. It was such a long day, you know, and it was
Right.
rubbish money, and it was, oh God. Yeah, I've never, you know, well, I've never liked being an adult, period. But honestly, you know, the things that are built in, as you know, the things that are built in, and this is normal. No, it's not normal. None of it, this is normal to me. But yeah, but you'll focus on the, where is the request instead of the demand? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that, please, and explain it better for me to understand? I'm a bit of a dimwit.
Right. Well, let's come at it first from a little bit of life experience. I was a sales manager for a company. And so I came to we were in Northern California and started doing some marketing down there. So they were extremely long days. I was getting new customers. I was training new people to distribute products, and the days were very long. So the body started getting fatigued pretty much 6 days a week. And so some aches and pains. So I actually went to a doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, you're stressed out. So yeah, your adrenals are stressed, blah, blah, blah. You drink too much coffee, you know, lifestyle, blah, 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 blah." The same routine that we've all culture. And so I'm looking at that and thinking, well, what am I going to do about that? So the first thought was, well, I'm going to have to cut back. I'm going to have to get more help. I'm going to have to. And then I had to stop a little bit and said, wait a minute, that's a demand. It conform to somebody's idea. Wow. We could say it's a medical model. We could call it whatever we want to. The doctor was a nice person, but that was a demand. So I had to look at it and said, you know what I really need to do? Potential. I'm down here trying to build a business, but I'm not getting, it's slow. So I really need to have more of a taste of potential. So what I started doing is I opened a center. Mm-hmm. So I go to work and at 5:30, 6 o'clock, I would stop and I'd say, okay, that's enough, right? I didn't do lunch. I didn't do breakfast. I would stop. And then I'd go down the center, get there by 6:30 and started classes. And 9:30, I'd go have my meal around 10 o'clock. I'd go home and do my computer work. And then I would get up the next day and be at work at 5 o'clock. So I did that for 14 years.
Good heavens.
And then every weekend I did some type of stuff. So you start to see, I actually converted the idea of demand, I'm going to keel over dead any minute because my heart's stressed, to all of a sudden, I just increased the hours and changed the relationship to it. It produced I got to meet wonderful people like you. And so all of that started to flow. So it brought, instead of the frustration of trying to get more customers, train more people, get more things done, I just simply got myself in a world of people that were looking for potential and loved to sit down and do an exercise and feel that potential coming in, feel those opportunities. They all had crazy stories about whatever it was. That doesn't really matter, right? It's just that they feel it. If they start to feel it, it's real, right? I mean, it's a tangible. Yes, you're not getting a pay. You start to feel to get more real in. And so that's what I found, started playing in with that. When I decided that the numbers slowed down in the center, I said, wow, time for a change. So one of my partners, one of my staff people, assistant, she said, well, you're doing it all wrong. I said, you know, you're right. I'm doing it all wrong. Why don't you take over? I'm going to go on a road. So I went on a road. I went to Kansas. I went to Denver, Colorado. I went out. I started doing lectures. I started doing talks. I go to bookstores. I have 70, 80 people show up. I just do talks. I can remember a bookstore in Denver. I want to rent your room back there. How many people can you get in? She said, probably about 70. I said, that should work. I said, so give me an open date. And I paid her for it. And she said, what's your topic? And I said, it don't matter. Make up anything. You just give me a topic. I'll go talk on it. So I had 70 chairs filled in standing room, people in the back that had all paid $6, $7, whatever, for to come to a talk.
Yeah.
And I went in and I asked someone, what, like,
I
no
lost you.
hands, right? And so I said, I'm going to start talking. If anybody has a question, cut me off. And so out of that, I got 50. So you see, it allowed me to expand it.
Lost you there. Out of that talk at the bookshelf, I'm saying at the bookstore. Meanwhile, back at the center in Solana Beach, California, old Mrs. Know-it-all's got no one in a chair in her, her classes. So everyone's like, oh, Chris isn't there. It's so funny, isn't it? Yeah, I remember those days. Again, just to let people know that this beautiful man and I have known each other since 2001 or two. I think it's two, like 20 odd years I've known you. He is what I consider my main mentor in my life. I've learned so much from this man. He's just brilliant, very humble, doesn't care if you like him or not. And if you really want to know what your own human potential is, be prepared to have your cage well and truly shook and rattled and rolled, because Dr. Chris Lemmon will definitely do that for you. So when you created the center, which I was a part of for 4 years, I came to you for many classes. I did my real licensed California reverendship at your center, and was qualified in the state of California to marry people. And I remember the single reason why I took that course, the content was amazing. It was psychology, psychometry, metaphysics, science, history. Oh my God, it was just bonkers brilliant. But the main reason why I took that course with you and was ordained by you legally, because you are a bishop in the state of the levels of the church, I did it so I could marry gay people. You know, that was my agenda. I'm like, how dare people say people can't marry? Who the hell do they think they are? I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to allow that in my lifetime. So that's the only reason, So anyway, so yeah, amazing. And I wanted to cover that too, because you are a bishop and most people are like, oh, but most people don't understand how the systems work. So when we say the church, they might think the Catholic or the Christian, but this is the metaphysical. Can you share a little bit of that insight, please?
Yeah, when you start to get licensed, the idea of any church is a structure is that, or that come from creation, God, whatever you want to call that, right? And so pretty much we're all an expression of some type of creation, so we're all empowered. So that's as good as it gets. The rest of it, then, as far as getting permits, it's just writing a letter to government and saying, hey, I'm starting a church. And then the government does everything in their power to make it a problem. But most certainly, if they can't find a problem with it, then they made me send pictures of my flyers. They made me they made me do all kinds of things that they won't ask for a list of the people's names, because we actually cannot make a list of the people's names. But it was interesting to comply with the legations of being able to put together. This goes back to demand and request. I went through all of these demands and turned them all around into requests. They wanted to ask how I was going to get to a goal, produced a goal. So I just produced a story about 5 steps of producing a goal. And then that became my teaching theme each year. So each year I would teach the same classes, different approaches or visions or views of it. I had a couple of students that took the same classes, same seminars for 5 years, so you could see it from a different approach.
Amazing.
Right?
Amazing.
Kind of fun to, you see how that opens up potential? I mean, I didn't know how to do that until I just did it. All you guys out there don't know how to do something until you do it. You know, this up here doesn't know. This up here has to learn. So you have to age, you have to move forward. You have to be able to see this as a request for you to step into potential and then try it. And when something don't work, you go another way.
Yeah,
you go down a dead end alley, you go another way.
Right. And it's like these people who, they're going to love the idea of, oh my God, I could start a church. And yes, you could. And we encourage it, but if someone like Chris, Dr. Chris here, never, ever, ever in a million years. And he was not using reverse psychology because he is actually a trained psychologist. He's got a couple of PhDs, this man, he's very smart. But he never, ever said, follow me. I am the Bishop Lemmon. Never, I'm like, I don't follow anyone.
Yeah.
No thanks. Let's all learn together and stand side by side and take care of each other. I'm not following anybody. And you never did that. And you always made it a safe place for people to come. And, even when people were like, oh my God, Chris is this and Chris is that, you just laugh at them and, be jovial. And there was never, I learned more about ego from you than anybody else. And some of the other things, what you did in those classes was you really stripped us down to nothing, stripped everything away layer by layer by layer. And a lot of us needed a lot of inner child healing, which I think is most adults, if we're honest. I remember one particular exercise that we did, and we had to buy a toy that we were going to play like a child. And I remember we all sat on the floor, like people from, like, I was in my 20s or just early 30s, I can't remember now. But and then there were people like much older and none of it mattered. And we were sitting on the floor like children. And I remember, because I came from such a horribly violent background, and the house was haunted and there were spooks and demonics, and it was awful. I was getting attacked by dark entities. And I remember sitting on the floor on my knees and getting whacked, like literally felt physical, frightening energy whacks. It was like I was right back in my bedroom and these entities were in my room and I'm screaming, but nobody could ever hear me. You know what I mean? It was just amazing. So I don't know why I raised that. Maybe I'm going somewhere with that. I don't know how we could apply that to request and demand, but this is all part and parcel of the beautiful tapestry of you and our relationship and the things that you teach and have taught.
So the demand doesn't always come from a person telling you what to do. It most certainly could be an unconscious, I would call an unconscious pattern. That pattern could be auditory, a voice. Straight, do this, do. There are people that go around with that going off in their head all the time. It drives them nuts, right? And when you start to look at the man, you've got to look at them and say, wow, that's a request for me to sit up. Do I want to sit up or not? That's a request for me not to play anymore. Do I want to play or not? Right? I had a really good example teaching that. I had like 18 women in a class and one man. And the guy had been a Baptist minister and an alcoholic. He had decided that that was an oxymoron. And so what he did, he quit both. He quit that particular church and became a Buddhist, right? And then out of Buddhism, he started kind of teaching the concepts of Buddha, but not in a Buddhist format, just the ideas, so on and so forth. So he came into, because he had me talk several times to the center and answer questions. And so he saw a bigger potential range, right? And so it was really kind of interesting. So he's taking that class, he's playing on the floor, and all the girls are down on the floor, and they, dress appropriately so you can get down on the floor. So they all got slacks on. They're all down on the floor, and he's down there and they're playing marbles or something. And some of the girls said, well, sit over here, sit over there. And finally he had to say, I'm a boy, I can't do all this. It was just funny because all of a sudden everybody's looking at him. It's like, huh? I mean, they couldn't quite get, I don't know what that meant. It didn't mean physically he couldn't sit on the floor. He was already sitting on the floor. It meant all of a sudden he had some type of a voice in his head saying, I shouldn't be playing with these girls. I'm a boy. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be. And you could see his eyes light up. All of a sudden he realized that now this minister, now he understand why he was an alcoholic. Now he was understanding how all of a sudden he was trying to get out of that. And really, it was just a demand all of a sudden to be gender specific and not just a human.
Yeah.
So he struggled with an undercurrent of what today I would say is a racist statement, right? It just simply means I'm right and you're wrong. That's pretty much a racist statement, right? And so it has nothing to do with anything other than label it on. So when you start to play with that, then someone gets that message in a certain way. They really need to convert that to like, what's my opportunities in here? Yeah, some things we shouldn't do. It's dangerous. Okay, that's wisdom. Stand close to the edge. Pay attention. Don't stand close to the edge. You know, but it doesn't mean that you can't look over the side. It doesn't mean I had a group of guys and we climbed in Yosemite. And one guy, when we got to the top, was so frightened. There's a little walkway and post, and he hung onto a post and he trembled. Oh. We were up there for a half an hour. We got on our bellies and crawled out to the edge because of slopes, and we crawled down to the edge looking, and then we had to backpedal to
right
long ways down. And he's over there just frightened. So when we left there, we had to actually pull his arms off that post and kind of drag him off the top because there was so much fear. That's an inability to say no to that. Post and said, yeah, I made a statement saying, hey, I don't go close to edges. That's cool. But the fear stopped him from even being functional or logical.
Yeah.
And so that's the nemesis.
That's the what? The nemesis?
No is.
That's
it's a nemesis that we face. How great that no is an intense piece into our life. So far on my end, both are connection down there is, but it looked like the recording came out really good last time. So I'm not really worried about this.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's up and down. It says my internet's fine, but it's obviously there's something, you know, in between the two.
Well, that's the part of the problem.
Say that again.
We're both troublemakers. That's part of the problem.
Definitely, definitely. And on that thing, I remember because I was raised like a lot of people, you know, at your school, at your metaphysical school. It was very much part of the class to get neutral to the Bible or to holy scriptures that owned us. And I'll never forget one of the exercises was, because for me, I was raised like not by my parents. They just were happy to get me and my brothers out of the house for some peace and quiet. So they used to make us go to church and Sunday school and Bible class, and it was awful. And I was so frightened I was going to die and all this judgment, and it really messes you up and really damages and scars you, in my opinion. And so to say anything against the Bible, like even when I was an adult, you know, it was like, oh my God, I couldn't. And you were like, right, hold the Bible up and thump it. I was like, oh my God. And it was amazing. Like, there was like, because your classes were so big, we used to sit in giant circles, didn't we? You could have 40 odd people there in one, you know, just depending on what we were studying. And at this little center, it was just amazing. And I remember being so like, my adrenals were going, I had heart palpitations, I felt guilty. I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is Jehovah going to smite me? You know, because we punched but it was such a clever, brilliant exercise, because in that moment, I realized, oh my God, I can actually decide to put the Bible down and not be in fear of it. Because any book that makes you frightened, like, oh, you better do as you're told, otherwise you're going to go to hell, you're going to die, this is going to happen, you're going to get, you know, plague upon plague on you. And but it's basically helped me neutralize. And that's something else I learned from you, is getting neutral, which would be great to talk about too. And, you know, see if we can wrap that into request and demand, because again, you've just given me so much in my life, and I share so much on my channel, and a lot of it is some of the stuff I'm like, oh, that's Dr. Chris, oh, that's Dr. Chris, oh, that's Dr. Chris, you know what I mean? I take all the credit. Yeah,
right. Of course.
I so don't. Okay. Of course, I don't. That's why you're on my channel. So I can say, this is the guy I learned this stuff from. But yeah. So let's go ahead with that, with getting neutral and request and demand in terms of human potential and how we can keep growing and developing and get neutral to things.
So what we call neutrality is really just converting the demand to a request. We can say no to it. That way we're neutral to it. That's just it. So I know a lot of people got upset when I had them buy a Bible and then take a dinner and have it on the table while they're eating. So people look at them with that Bible on the table. And then a lot of people, depending on the class, got freaked out when I had them tear a page out and blow their nose. After they paid 20, 30 bucks for a Bible and they got to tear a page out somewhere. And they were saying, can I take one at the end? You know, it's like, how neutral can you get? How much can you say? How much does no affect you, right? Opportunity really is just, you know, when we look at unconscious patterns, I got a quote that I like. One of my quotes, I think. I'm not sure. Life is saying no to death for half of the population. And that's because we have an unconscious pattern called a way towards. It's not a bad thing. It just means that if you go through life always afraid of death or the end of something, then therefore you're always attending to it. So you're always supporting it. You're putting energy into it all the time. You're putting energy into your fear. If you turn around and look at the other opportunity and said, I'm going to look for cautions, but my attention is my goal and what I want to accomplish, then all of a sudden you've switched that and now you're going towards something instead of away from it. The power that comes from that allows you to just find a pathway through the forest, so to speak, right? It just, I remember one time getting lost in a pygmy forest. And here I was with a lady and we were hiking. And she said, do you have any idea where we're at? And I said, no, I don't. It's funny to say that all trees look the same. They really don't look the same. I actually kind of, when I wander in the woods, I find landmarks. So I usually know where I'm at. I do a lot of hiking. But this is a pygmy forest. And I'm sitting there looking at these trees that are short and are only about 7, 8 feet tall. And I'm thinking, wow, I had to stop and sit there with her and said, let's just ground a little bit and let's just kind of relax. I have to figure out the difference between these trees. As soon as the tree looked different than a tree normally did for me, they all looked the same. I didn't notice the difference. So when I went through them, I didn't have a landmark. I knew I recorded a landmark. I just couldn't find it. So I had to sit there and open that potential up. And then I looked at a tree and I looked at the other tree, they're little trees. And I said, okay, I now see the difference. As soon as I could see the difference, I could walk out of there because now I could tell which ones I've been by. Up until then, I was stuck because I didn't attend to it consciously. Unconsciously, I got it. I had to bring it up. I had to bring it out. I had to find it. And that's the ability to access a potential. When you're trying to figure something out and you can't find it, you got to go in there and bring it up. It's somewhere in there. It's just been an unconscious piece. Come on. That's where your potential is always something you don't know, which by definition is not conscious. Bringing it up, sitting with it, walking with it, whatever you do, if it's a walking meditation, a sitting meditation, I mean, don't sit there for hours, sit there for 15, 20 minutes, a half hour, and then go do something. And it'll give you clues. It'll start to show up. Pay attention, and that will guide you to whatever you're going to do. It's not an ism. It's just simply your ability to move with an idea. You have accomplished things. I watched you get ideas and bring all kinds of craziness together to make it all work. And that was what was fun, right? And we saw other people. I had a student in San Francisco when the earthquake hit San Francisco. She didn't show up for class for a couple of weeks. I called and she said, well, with the earthquake, I can't leave the house anymore. Post the earthquake, she quit leaving the house. That's someone who can't say no to a threat of death. Earthquake's over. Only lasted a few minutes. Yeah. Come on, give me a break. If it didn't kill you, you're good to go. That's it. And that's all of life. That's where opportunity sits, in that moving forward, and that being able to say, no, earthquake was a request, not to stand underneath anything falling off a building.
Right. You know, this whole playing with energy and getting neutral and request versus demand, it's just so fascinating when we take a moment to sit in and then we start to figure out our own stories that get triggered by us having this kind of conversation.
Right.
There's so many ways to go, and I love it. When you mentioned meditation just then, you said, you know, let's sit 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, and then get up and do something. Myself personally, we did a lot of different meditation, but really fun stuff. Like you'd take us on and we'd have to imagine a color. Let's say it was orange, and then we would sit with the orange, and then we would raise our crown. We'd make our crown that color. And then if we were reading someone's energy, we'd match crowns. And like, I've never since heard stuff like that. It was so many fun exercises that really, really helped me grow. But when it comes to people on their spiritual journey, which more people are than ever, right, in this very time that we're in right now, 2022, and there are people like, well, I meditate 4 hours a day, and inside I think to myself, God, I'd stab myself in the eye with a pen. How boring. 4 hours a day. I went to this big place in Costa Rica. It was supposed to be this very, 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 very spiritual place, you know. And the woman running it, she'd be buggered off for 7 hours a day. And her husband would like, she's meditating. I'm like, well, she's got 3 kids. Who's looking after the kids? Do you know what I mean? Where is she? She's absent meditating, doing what? I'm like, oi, love, get off your ass, get out that hammock, eat some food. She was horribly underweight. That was really what the issue was. And like, stop trying to get in there. We need you. These people need you. I left after 3 days. I'm like, oh, I'm not staying here. This is a nonsense. But so in terms of meditation, people think there's no way to do it right. I mean, how do I do it? Is it, you know, what would you say? What is the point? And what kind, could you give us an exercise that could help people who are maybe just starting out?
Yeah, I think that if you start to look at an impasse or an obstacle that you have, I'll give you an example. I was doing some wiring in my garage. I had found that someone had put lights on the outside of the garage, that kind of carriage lights, and they'd used some old extension cords, orange extension cords that you get from Home Depot. It's thinner wire, and they spliced them together. Not very safe to have. So I was looking at how to get them out of the wall. They kind of went in around somewhere, and I thought, wow, if I start pulling on these, this is going to come apart. And I'm going to have to tear all paneling off and everything to do this project. So I could see a no, this won't work. I could see that. So I had to find a solution. How do I get around that? So I stopped the project and left all that stuff sitting there. And a couple of days later, my wife finally said to me, you didn't finish that, you were doing it. I said, yeah, no, I didn't finish it yet because I haven't found a solution yet. She said, well, normally you finish things pretty quick. I said, yeah, but I didn't know I was going to have a problem until I got into it. So I waited a couple of days. Finally, one day, I'm just sitting there looking out at my pond. I'm relaxing. I just took a breath and I said, okay, let's just let things go and see if there's anything that comes up. This is like a 15, 20 minute. So I'm just saying hello to my body. I like to kind of talk to my body. I like to see that the organs are all talking, communications going on. I just kind of want to feel that, you know, come on, liver, are you talking to my spleen? What's going on there? You know, come on, brain, get up. And so I just kind of exploring what's going on, which is my relationship to health, right? And I'm doing that. When I let go, then I go outside. I say, okay, what kind of a project? And the first image I had was there's this little crack, maybe 2.5 inches wide, that you could see the wire going through a wall and coming down. And all of a sudden that flashed. And I think, wow, that's a clue. Took me another day and a half to figure what the clue was. It was simple. I had to pull the wire gently until all of a sudden the splice showed up. When it did, I could reach in with a needle and those pliers and grab those, pull them up, and then tie them off, and then pull the wire through and put a new wire in. It took me almost a week to find a solution to that silly problem. And I found it in the meditation with just a picture that showed up. And even with a picture sticking in my head, I still had to interpret it. So when I get an image or a picture, I'm saying, how do I put movement into this picture or this idea to make something happen in my life? One is to have an inspiration. The other one is to accomplish something, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. You were great at it. we would sit down, you'd get a crazy idea and you'd go out and you make it happen. You make contacts, you do this, that, and the other. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. It didn't much matter. We invested in it and we followed it and it pursued it. And so from that, you get validation. You say, wow, now I learned what I can do. That's the game, right? We're trying to figure out what we can do and what we're good at, and then we go with it, and that's our way into potential. That's it, right?
It's amazing. Yeah, during that time, when I was studying with you, I made multi-millions of dollars in real estate with my former husband, and then lost the old bloody lot, mate. Lost the lot. But during that time as well, we had a brand new 944 silver Porsche Carrera, and he didn't like me driving it. It's very bossy. But I used to drive it to your classes, and that was like the only time. And I named him Kevin, this Porsche, Kevin, right? And I loved driving it over the Coronado Bridge, and it did handle like it was on rails. It was quite the drive. And when you hit 50 miles an hour, this little noise happened, and the spoiler pops out the back, your little fan thing spoiler. Anyway, you taught me an exercise that I hadn't yet put into practice, and it was like, you were like, one time if you're getting chased by a police car, for example, imagine energetic something on top of the car or create a distraction. Well, I shit you not. This is exactly what happened. I'm going over the bridge super fast in my Porsche, finally free for a night. And all of a sudden there's a bloody cop, a motorway cop. What do they call them? Freeway cops, chips?
Highway patrol in California.
Highway patrol. Behind me, like right up to the car. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be late. Like, I don't need this. And then I remembered one of the challenges you gave us, one of the tools. So I literally imagined, this guy's beeping at me, he's telling me to pull over. I'm thinking, and I'm looking in my mirror and I'm shouting, no, leave. I will not, go away, like that. And I'm being really strict and just glaring at him. And then in my mind, I imagined a crazy mad person on top of the car. And it was just a man with nothing, a waist and a head and a neck and arms. And I imagined this half a man with this black long hair whirling round and round going, boo, boo, boo. And oh my God, guess what happened? It was like magic. All of a sudden, the cop just went, he saluted me and he buggered off. He buggered off. I was like, oh my God, this works. This stuff works. Yeah.
So that's what I call, once again, that was a demand to comply with the speed limit, blah, blah, blah. And, you were being naughty, which is all right, because that's an adventure that we find potential in, right? And so there you were. And it's like, all of a sudden, you appeared aware of what was going on. All of a sudden, he was confident with, like, you weren't a threat. And he just takes off. Whatever the story is, it's his story, not yours. It don't matter. You took some action to convert. There's not a protocol. It's just simply, you just put energy into saying, I'm not being a victim here. This is not going to happen again, right? Been there, done that, right? Just not going to happen. And that starts to change it. I don't know how many times I'm the same thing where I'm flying along. And one time I was late for class when I was in college, and I'm flying down the road, back road. It's an evening class. And all of a sudden I see a car up ahead. And when it comes over the rise, I could see on the bumper, it's a highway patrol. I come over the next rise with the little bridges, and I see him pull over the side of the road. And I think, oh, he's going to have me pass him. He's going to come in and pull me over. And I thought, oh, heck with it. I just kept going. It was maybe a 40-mile zone. I was probably doing 65. And I just looked back, and he never started out again. He just parked. It's just like, whatever. I just like, let it go. Just let it go. And he just let it go. And I just made it. I got to class just on time. It worked out really good. So it's interesting. It's not like, here's a surefire thing. It's here's a surefire potential. Play with this, master this. And it works, and it works better. I think I said before in one of these talks, when I'm out driving, my wife's with me and we're going somewhere. By the time I hit the second or third red light, why she'd say, let's go to Starbucks, have a cup of coffee. You shouldn't be hitting red lights. You don't do that, Chris. It's not because I'm better than anybody. It's just simply, it's not on my vision of the trip. my vision of the trip is I see going down the road, everything is open, everything's flowing. I don't have traffic. I don't have a problem. So all of a sudden, when something happens, I've been influenced. All of a sudden, there's a demand on me. When I take a little break, have a cup of coffee, we could call that a meditation if you like, sit there for 5 or 10 minutes and talk to her about who knows what, and then get back in the car and all of a sudden everything's flowing again, right? Life should be, the potential is flowing into it. It should be simple, right? And we at this time in life all see lots of demand out there and lots of structure out there. That's just part of the game, right? And so you've got to look at that and don't make that a battle. Relax, right? Navigate your way through this. Enjoy life, squeeze the juice out of it, and have fun with it. Embrace that potential. People say, what are you going to do, Chris? And I say, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do something, right? I have no idea. It'll flow, right? So I put together this workshop, I put that together, I do this, I do that, people come back and say, well, you're retired. So I'm leaving for a month. So usually every summer we go to the Indian reservation, and my wife does the musical stuff, and she does because she's a musician. And I let them know at the council, when I get there, I let them know I'm in town, and they start sending people to my hotel room. And so I just spend the day seeing people. I don't charge them anything because I don't have any money, but it's just like they come in and they're telling me their problem, whether it's a marital problem or a drinking problem or a drug problem or an anger management or racist problem, or even just their dogs are mad at them, whatever. And we just sit and talk about it, right? And that's it. And then I get great notices and emails from them saying, God, you really made a difference in my life. Well, I don't know. It's just taking a break sometimes and getting past that obstacle, because they have a lot of no's in their world. Getting past that obstacle, really, all poor people do, right? There's a lot of that poor people have. You don't have finances. It's really tough. And so just getting past that is a big piece. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
again, for me, this has been constant, nonstop genocide for our, darker skin, like you and I, a couple of whiteys, our beloveds of the brown and the black and the, darker colored skins. I did a little broadcast with the babies. They're not really babies. I kind of call them my babies in Uganda. Bringing an awareness to a slum there. It's my second broadcast. I've worked with them for 3 years. We bought them guitars. They have the guitars. It's 3 years on. They've been learning. Right. We were going into, I was just saying how impossible the governments deliberately make it for people to thrive and survive. It's very purposeful. In my mind, it's deliberate genocide. Right. Shame on all you governments. And they charge the children, if the children are lucky enough to get to school, it's $150 a term, but they barely pay the parents $50 a month. So they make it impossible. And they're doing it across America. They're crushing and killing and crumbling America and, other countries. I just got a whack. How funny, an energy whack. One of those and one of those. And so, it's just, again, there's so much demand, on energy and survival. The survival mode in people right now is at chronic all-time highs, isn't it? Like, how would you suggest that people might be able to manage that a little bit more?
Well, it's a little hard managing it, but I think, to me, when I start looking back, you go back to around when modernity started an influence in a culture is around 1750. Evolutionary changes take 300-400 years to process. We don't live that long. So when you start to look at change coming in, the changes that came, you've got to remember that somewhere in the 1700s, the people in Europe said there is nothing new to learn. We know everything. That's what they thought. And so they started saying that if you were rich people, then you're rich for your entire lifetime, because they had money and wealth and property, and they never spend it all. In other words, it will all yielded income for them. And all the poor people just simply work for them. And so that was the standard at the time. So we could look back and we say, well, that wasn't fair, just like we were talking about 996 in China. It's very different. So we're going into something that's going to be different. I don't know what it's going to be. right now, to get into something different, it's kind of like if you want to rearrange and decorate your house, the easiest thing is to take all the furniture out, lay down covers, start painting the walls, buy new furniture, redecorate. You literally have to take it all apart to build it new.
Yeah.
So in this mandate, we're taking it all apart to build new, to restructure it, right? So it looks like what we accomplished in the 60s and 70s and 80s is all falling apart.
Mhm.
Yes, the whole system had to fall apart because it's a house of cards anyhow. So let it all fall apart and let's start to rebuild it. I think the young people that are coming up that seem to be disenchanted very quickly with things, quit jobs. I know I talked to this guy just at Starbucks, and he said, oh my goodness, their turnover rate is 48%. He said, that's not so much the problem. He said, they come to work and they work for a couple months and then they don't show up anymore. They don't quit, they just don't show up. And he said, the big problem is that they have final paycheck. Their address is no good. We can't send them the final paycheck. We have an obligation legally to get that money to them.
Yeah.
So he said, we have to go hire a private detective to go find where they moved to give them their check. And he said it costs like 10 times the lousy few dollars to get the money to them. It's really intense. It's funny when you start to look at the complexity that goes in all these different directions, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I would have never thought about that level of the problem. I thought, well, if they don't show up, it's just, but yeah, they still have an obligation to get the money to them. They got a contract. So the government won't allow you to put that in a bank or keep it. You have to get it to the person. So we have maybe too much structure. I didn't understand structure until I really originally started in college in engineering, and then I switched to psychology. When I started getting into symmetry and prime numbers and mathematics, I started realizing that, oh, my idea of things was that we divide it as like a pie and we just cut it into pieces. We can divide a pie 4 ways, 5 ways, 6 ways, 7 ways. But when you start to look at structure, our body's not made up of circles. There is a lot of circles, but there's a lot of octagons, hexagons, triangles. And you start looking at a triangle that's made of prime sides, 3, 5, 7, 9, and you are not going to be able to divide those down. You can't get a square root of those. So when you start to look at some of these pieces, they don't divide up very evenly. So when we look at potential, if we hear a story, or if they hear Chris's story and they think, wow, I can do that. Yes, you can do it. Not my way. You're going to do it your way.
Yeah.
I don't know what your way is. So I'm not telling you, hey, this is what you do and you get there. I'm saying this is what you do and you find out. You embrace and you find out what your potential is going to be. That's how you get into it. You got to go explore it and see where it's going to go. So people sit there and they say, I just read this book and it's really great. I'm going to follow what this guy said. It doesn't work for them. And it doesn't work over and over again because they're not taking the inspiration and finding their way to get there. They're trying to follow someone else's path. Those don't divide up. They're not really equal. They're not equal. All the potential is equal, but the way to get to it's not the same for everybody. And so we really have to recognize that. So we have to make that consideration. When somebody says, I can't do it, then what I hear is, I can't do it your way. That's what I hear.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. You know, talking of the way that people get to achieve something their way, I think one of the, a good example of that in my life was you introduced me 20 years ago to the work of Manly P. Hall. And
right.
Yeah, and it's so funny how people are so triggered right now, you know, so everyone's learning about the satanics and the Freemasons and the rituals and the 33rd degree and all of this stuff is ancient occult and esoteric knowledge. And so now, so like I did a little broadcast where I was just giving some breathing techniques and I was giving a lot of books that I like to read for people that want to kind of educate or learn more. And one of them is Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of Everything. And that, you know, he was granted a 33rd degree from the Masons because of that tome of work that he put together. And I know you've got a different take on it and I want to hear it because I want to give it balance and the real reason and what actually happened and what that story is. And I mentioned that, and some bloke comments, "Oh my God, you're evil," because he got triggered because I mentioned the 33rd degree, but because people aren't doing enough of their own thinking, reading, listening, meditating, expanding, they're like, oh. And also at the same time recommended a book on the Knights Templars, the history of the Solomon's Mount, King David, and a woman, she was like, oh, I'm unsubscribing. And I'm like, okay, bye, bye, toodaloo, kind of thing, But yeah, it's just so interesting, right? They're like, wait, it's like saying to a black child and a white child, skin color, grown up together and played together, and then all of a sudden they're idiot adults that are interfering with their programming, and then all of a sudden one of the kids like, aren't we supposed to be mad at each other for something because of the idiot adults, But going back to Manly P. Hall, can you give your version of that book, The Secret Teachings of Everything, and him getting the 33rd degree?
Manly P. Hall was interesting.
Oh, you froze.
Character, you remember him? I'm old enough to remember. Would go to, I lived in, so I would actually go into his talks. He would actually have, his limo would pull up to the side door and he'd walk in, his driver would be out there, and he'd walk in and he'd come up on stage from the side door, and he'd look at his aide and he'd say, what's my talk on today? And they would tell him, and then he would just talk for an hour. Yeah. And then when it was all done, he'd just go out to the side door and get his limo and go away. That was pretty much it. So background on Manly. Manly P. Hall was not one of those people that traveled the world. Manly P. Hall was a person that went to the New York Library for several years. And he read every book in the New York Library. And he put all this ideas together out of books. He put all this together, and he literally could, after he read a couple books, he could close his eyes, just kind of like reading a movie script. You can then imagine it happening. He read all these books and he could close his eyes and imagining it happening. So for him to be able to become a Mason or any other club at the time, way back then, joining clubs was kind of the elite thing you did, right? It was how you got recognition. He actually talked at Religious Science Church too in the very beginning too. He talked there. He talked several different places. So for him, putting all this together, he was trying to tell people, look at the old rules, the old structure. People got out of that rule by imagining it different. They could see it unfold. You could say that's a vision. You could say that's an inspiration. I don't care what you call it, but you got enough information where you could then imagine it different, and then you just make it happen. That's it. And so he put together a center, put together all that money, all that stuff. He was not born rich. And he put all that together for himself just by being able to say, imagine this, take this and work with it. He didn't say these were rules. He said, here's a pathway. Try this. Imagine a relationship where you've got a temple and you've got people honoring things. Can you imagine that level of respect? Can you imagine that set of rules? Now blow that up and create another image, another place, another time, and imagine that. Now you start to see eventually you have to imagine you doing something different. That was his whole goal in being able to communicate that. So yes, I loved him as a character. Towards the end, why he got a little kind of convoluted because he had some health challenges. But most certainly he was very dynamic, and his library was really, really fun. I actually spent a lot of hours in his library and put together a lot of different workshops and seminars out of data from his library. And I've got a multitude of his books in my library. I got about 2,000 books in my library in the living room, never owned a TV. So it's pretty much all comes out of books, right?
Yeah.
And so I read a book and I imagine it a different way. I see, wow, there's a piece of data I can utilize. I can build a bigger platform. That's what potential is, bigger platform, right? So that's it, right?
I love it. It's great. And again, as people are kind of coming to awareness of global truths, world truths, universal truths, realities that have been hidden from us, the hidden hand, etc.
Right.
The 33rd degree Masons, people say that it is the highest degree. It's not. It goes up to at least 100. And what's so sad to me is there's so many beautiful men in particular who are part, and they've got no idea of the nefarious mixing of the dark and the light, you know, within that environment, which of course I'm discussing old news. This is nothing new, but it just is what it is right now. So yeah, no, it's great to talk about someone like Nlp Hall, and you influenced me with his literature. And for you guys out there, if you want a quick insight into Nlp Hall, there's a lot of free lectures he did on YouTube. Just look up Nlp Hall, and his talks are quite remarkable, aren't they? The way he discusses and hypothesizes and postulates.
They are, and Horowitz is also very good too. And Horowitz actually did some reviews of Manly's work, and so I've met him a couple of times too, and he's got some really good talks on Tarot, Horowitz. So there's a lot of resources out there. I think it doesn't matter where you get that. You could read Robert Harrison's book, the second. That's a profound book. It's a profound book looking at Second Sleep. It's called.
Oh yeah.
And by Robert Harris, and so it's a book of looking at the future, where all of a sudden we've arrived way in the future, where the evils are like the phone or the computer with a bitten apple on it. Those were the sins that were, if you had one, you would be put in prison, right? And so it's really a whole different utopic world where all of a sudden everything is run by a church, and it's all church rules. It's really kind of interesting. So all these, I think when you read them, it's not like this is the way it's going to be. It gives you a chance to have a vision. We're going forward and we don't know what into. So if you can start to imagine something, your ability to imagine something within that potential is your guiding post. That's how you're going to get something done. If you're looking at, no, I can't do this, no, I can't do that, no, I can't do that, there's nothing but a demand there on you, and therefore you're stuck and you can't go anywhere. So we find a way to put communication in, we find a way to talk to people, we find a way to interact, right? And that's the name of the game, right? It's just like whatever it takes, right? As I say, any topic. I've read so many books, I could talk about most anything, right?
I know.
Doesn't mean any of it's right.
I know.
I'm not sure that there's any value in right.
No, I think you're amazing. And I'm just so happy to play with you on my small but mighty channel and get insights into your thinking and share the things that I've learned from you, you know, and who you be and what you are. And it is good as well to, you know, remember the kind of different scholars out there. Not that we're being academic snobs here, we're not at all. How boring if we were. But people are just seeking and they're searching and they need input. They need to help themselves grow and figure out what it requests and demands energy and their highest human potential, recognizing patterns that they keep getting stuck in the same patterns, which largely, in my opinion, most of the patterns that I feel we get stuck in are loops running from childhood. What say you to that?
You know, it's an interesting piece. I did a board breaking group for a group of women, and they're women writers, and they were looking at potential. And I did some talks for this women's group, and so finally I said, okay, we'll get some boards and we'll break some boards, okay. And so it was like, oh, that'd be fun. So here I have these women, and we did it outside the meeting hall. We would back, and there was some kid, maybe 13 years old, on his bicycle, maybe 12, 13, and he's just watching, right? Because we're out in the backyard, and it was an alley, and we were out there, and I broke a couple boards, and I got up, and then one lady broke a board, and then this next lady, she was around 60 some years old, so she had a lot of taboos in her world. She was a woman, 60 some years old, she can't do this, blah, 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 whatever. So she hit that and she didn't break it. And it you know, it stings when you don't break it. And so then the next woman going up, she was already being cautious. So she hit it and didn't break. And it's like, okay, now we need some success. So this boy back there, which I didn't know at all, he said, can I have a turn? And I said, sure, come on over, have a turn. And so he comes on over and he hits the board and breaks it. That's it. So he said, that wasn't hard. And I said, no, do you have a sister? And he said, she's just little. I mean, how little? She's 8. Well, go get her and have her come over and break a board. So he goes and gets his sister. I set some boards up. I'm talking to them a little bit and getting them hyped up again. The sister comes over and I said, we need a girl to break a board. So break that board, would you? And she goes, I don't know if I can. Your brother broke it. And she goes, if he broke it, I can break it. Bam! She hit that board and it broke. And all of a sudden, all the women go, oh, okay, right. We just had to get past that no that was sitting there that one lady introduced because of her age and her picture womanhood was much older, right? And so the rest of them, although they were younger, all of a sudden they got intimidated by that. And so it took a girl to get them out of it. It's really amazing. Very interesting how those unconscious pieces get in there. We don't know they're there, but they influence us highly.
Yeah, they really do. There was that phrase, oh, you're throwing it like a girl. Oh, you girl, like it was a downwards spiral to an insult. I remember years ago, my mum, I think my mum's like 74 right now. But I remember when she was 40, she's saying, I'm going to cut my hair. Now that woman has spent more time on her hair than anyone I've ever met on this planet, right? And she's always doing her hair. I remember when we were growing up, she'd do the beehive and back comb and this hairspray. And, she'd put the budgerigar out the room, but let the kids run around and breathe it all in. Anyway, so her hair, she gets to 40 and her hair's got dark brown with these big green eyes and this kind of olive. She's beautiful. And she's like, I'm going to cut my hair. I'm like, what? Why? She goes, well, I'm 40 now. And I remember this is like years ago. I'm like, and she goes, well, I'm 40. I'm like, does that mean something? Like the black and the white kid, is it supposed to be something?
Yeah, right.
She's like, yeah, no, I can't have long shoulder length hair. I'm like, Mum, dude, of course you can. And I tell you, I was talking to my friend Diane Forster the other day. And there's her, our friend Sheila, and a couple of other girls. And I suggested over the years to all of them to grow their hair longer, just to try it. They are all of them between 40 and 70, and they all have long hair and they're all frigging beautiful and they're all owning it, because they push back on that taboo, that demand. Like, I'm sorry, society says, balls to society, because we need to completely restructure, rewrite and own what we think in terms of going forward. So it's quite amazing, like you said, the influence is just incredibly, to me, so ridiculous. It's like a guy was in the house here, and I'm a ballsy bird, you've known me a long time, and I had to organize to have some paintwork done. But I didn't know about the culture here and the machismo, the macho kind of,
Right.
So this guy took one of the sofas outside to lay some tiling down. Unfortunately, him or his little workmate, and it was his little sweet tiny guy with him, they got a black hand on the side of the sofa, right? New sofa. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. Now, I wasn't rude. I wasn't aggressive. I'm like, dude, you need to get that off. Do you have some stuff? Because it's probably happened before. I was trying to give him a solution, because don't give me a solution. Don't give me that problem. Okay, I do not own the genes for any of that stuff. Cooking, fixing stuff, it doesn't exist in me. I did not get that download when I came through the pipe to get on the planet. No. And the guy was looking at me and his eyes were flashing like this, because he was he couldn't believe that this white bitch, this middle-aged white bitch, who he assumes is rich, because everyone does here. If you're white and you're in your 50s and you've got a quad, they think, rich bitch, so wrong. And I remember consciously cognizing his reprogramming, his patterning, do I punch her? Do I slap her? Do I put my hand over her mouth? What he did was he ditched me. He ditched the job. He never came back. And I remember telling a couple of people, and they're like, Oh, yeah, you don't know about the machismo. I'm like, no, what is that? Yeah. Did you tell him what to do? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yo, bitch, you ruined my sofa. Get your ass there and clean it. And they're like, they were like, oh, no, 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 Dani. No, 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 no. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it is so incredible. Each culture. That's why traveling, you gotta travel, right? You gotta travel. Speaking of which, I remembered another story. I hope you don't mind me landing this on you, but it is a good one. Your stories are always great. You went somewhere and there was some kind of a guru and he was stirring and you interrupted him. You tapped his crown, which is why manipulating energy is not always a good thing. But can you share that story? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, most certainly. It was kind of, the story took a while to develop. And the first I went in to see a guy, and it was actually in Tibet. And so he was doing a meditation. So he was a lama, and he had a bowl in front of him with some rocks and stuff in it and water. And he was sitting there and he was doing a meditation. So they're imagining something is what they're doing, that in their meditations, they imagine. You see, their sand paintings are all structures, right? So they're imagining a structure, all working with how we can bring ideas into form. And so I got that and I wanted to see one. So this guide took me and said, there's one, he's in meditation, but take a look, go through, whatever. So I went in there and I see him doing that. So I just matched his crown to see what pictures he was looking at, because I was just curious what he's doing, And when I did that, he looked at me like he was really mad. So I just smiled, waved like this, and I just left. Well, that image was in my head. And all night, I just couldn't go to sleep because it's like him staring at me. And so one of the group said, you shouldn't have done that. Now he's mad at you and he's going to stalk you down. It's like, what do you got this battle going on? There's not a battle. I actually think that he wants something. So it took me a day and a half to finally get it. We were in a different temple, climbing up a hill, and I was sitting resting because it was steep. And when I was resting, I'm going, wow, what a hard job getting up this hill. Why don't they build the temple at the bottom? This is so silly building at the top. I mean, I realize it's the ascent to heaven, all this story, but it's like, it's a pain in the butt. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, he's got a pain that he can't get through. Their religious idea was that all these lifetimes that you keep redoing this and learning from lifetimes. That's his story. Okay, that's good, no problem. He's looking at a story where he died young. Wow. So all of a sudden I go in and I find a picture of, I still see him staring at me, and I find a picture, and you see all of a sudden there's a landslide, and you see him as maybe like a 12 or 13-year-old boy getting caught in a landslide and getting buried. And all I did was I run that picture backwards. And here he is as a boy, and rocks start to roll, and he jumps aside, and the rocks go down the hill, and he doesn't die. He's standing there looking at the rocks, kind of like, oh. And then I look at this picture of him staring at me with an angry face. And at that point, he sits up, turns around, and walked away. God. He didn't see, it's like he did something wrong that lifetime or whatever that was, and there was no way to fix it. I fixed it. I imagined it differently, and he couldn't. And so for that, he was gracious. It's amazing, I think, how complex that unconscious piece can be, especially from someone who has been studying for so long like this guy. Was kind of amazing. So I never took it that he was angry at me, but I just took it that he wanted help. He was stuck, and that was it. We're all a little stuck somewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
And again, it's like, gifting people like the little tools and techniques that we are like dripping through this whole kind of little broadcast here. So right. matching crowns, again, not deliberately manipulating energy, because I remember years ago you telling me, I won't say her name, but there was this very famous little blonde woman who was this young 40s, gorgeous, very angelic. and she was on stage, and you wanted to see what the energy was that was in protection with her, see if she was real or a fake. And you, I think, imagine throwing like speedboats with people firing guns, and then you said you received the biggest whack, the biggest energy whack ever. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was on the floor.
You were on the, see that?
Yeah, I doubled over. My son and I were standing in the back, and we were debating how she was doing a lecture, and I was saying, how is she managing the room? How is she balancing it out so that people could attend to her and learn and not just try to mirror off of her? And so, because she was quite capable and famous, and he said, oh, I think it's this blue-green color or something. And I said, well, it's either that or it's this brown color. And we're debating how she's doing it. So I just matched the blue-green that he picked and put a picture into it about somebody attacking. And I got clobbered. I stand up and my back's hurting. And I said, okay, you're right. It's a blue-green.
Oh my God. Wow.
So she was keeping it safe for everybody so that no fear or fright could get in. So she could keep the attention going. It was a really good element for a teacher to do. And she had a big audience and she was famous. So here she's making this happen. And of course, I stepped on it. Now, what was funny was she took a break.
She took a break.
And when she took a break, she left stage and said, I felt you. And I shook her hand.
Oh.
She noticed that I stepped on that energy range. She wasn't mad. She just noticed I was in it.
That's crazy.
So it was kind of like, you got to be careful where you put your nose.
Yeah. See, and I really enjoyed her. And again, I don't want to say her name, even if people guess, I'm not going to say what her name is.
Right.
Because I witnessed her myself. And she was the best medium I've ever seen. She read people from the stage. She brought messages from grandparents. She was so plugged into love. And there wasn't a person that didn't feel that love resonance.
Right.
And whatever happened to her, whether it was a possession, whether it was a spell, whether it was just dark programming, Trojan horse programming, she went all Jesus in a really negative way, and then cast away all of her devotees. And I mean, unbelievable. And now when you look at her, she's unrecognizable physically. It's like, oh, I can't be pretty, I can't be slender, I can't be blonde, I can't be beautiful, I can't be sexy. I have to be dowdy and overweight and have like something's living under my skin, or I don't know. Again, that's why I'm not saying her name, because I don't want to be cruel about anybody, but it's a good example of like request, demands, human potential. But that, and I thought, wow, she's got this massive audience for so long, and now there'll be lots of converts because it's her that will also continue to follow down the Jesus road, down the fearful God, the Lucifer, Satan that everyone thinks is, loving, but it's actually Satan and Lucifer that they're worshipping, but they don't realize that yet. That's really, really sad. And that's, of course, is out and coming out, and more people are talking about it. And what do you think?
I was doing a lecture in, I think, Colorado one time, and I somehow or another picked up some type of bacteria. So I was running a fever, and it was okay because it was cold. So I was outside with no shirt on because I was running a fever about 101, something like that. And so I was like, yeah, whatever. And so one of my students there came over and said, but you're all sweaty. And what's wrong? I said, well, I picked up, I don't know, pneumonia or something. I just got some type of bug. And they go, why aren't you in the hospital? I said, I don't need to go to the hospital, but I need to get well. So, but I have a schedule. I've got people to see. I got talks to do. So I'm not going to abandon my schedule. When this is all over, I'm going to take a break and recoup, right? And he's kind of just staring. He says, I've never seen you sick. I said, hey, come on, I'm just human. Something got me. I have no idea what. The same thing in India. Somewhere towards my 2 months in India, that last 10 days, I picked up pneumonia in South India. So I was still hiking around, still doing things. I just didn't eat for 10 days. I was trying to work it out of my body. So I would walk, and then when I got tired, I'd just sit down and I'd tell the group, okay, you guys go ahead. I'm sitting here. I go to sleep, I wake up, and then I get them, and that's it. And so after about 10 days, I finally got it out of my body. But yeah, it's just, I had all kinds of ideas of things I wanted to do in Calcutta, for example. I wanted to go see a few sites, and there was a taxi strike. And so we had to walk. And even though it was only a couple miles, there's no way I could walk 2 miles. I was just too fatigued. So I'd walk about a mile and sit. And then the rest of the group went. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing. We're all just human, right? So we have to kind of deal with that. And we don't get crazy enough to think that we got all the power in the world, but we still have potential. We just got to find a pathway. I was working on something and I didn't find a pathway yet. And when you don't find a pathway and you're pushing too hard, boy, you can bang your head on a wall quite a few times, right? Mm-hmm. Until you find a way to maneuver. And that's what life's all about. It's a game, right?
It is a game.
Yeah.
It's a game. And we have to make the rules up as we go along. Talking of games, I remember, again, going back into the training that you laid out for us. One of the trainings that we did was we had to take a deck of tarot cards, and they were big, like yeah, like this, and they were blank, and it was the Rider-Waite deck. And we had to color them with colors, the same color as the card, the actual card in the deck. And I remember I'd always had a bit of an aversion to tarot. I preferred the more lighter vibration of, because every second time I had a tarot card reading, I'd get the tower, things would go to shit. You know, I'm like, I don't like those cards. I don't like those cards. So, but what was interesting was with you guys, when we did that training and we did that coloring, I physically felt like I absorbed every single card in my body. It was the strangest metaphysical thing. By the time I was done, there were some people that were so in love, they were going to use tarot as their reading deck if they were going to read cards. For me, I felt like lifetimes of exhaustion in my body connected to them. Now, I love to see people reading them, you know, but I have absolutely no resonance, like whatsoever, to the tarot at all, and myself. But don't knock it at all. I mean, it's great, whatever floats your boat. But I want to go back down the timeline a bit with you on that, because you created that exercise for us. And also, can you go into a little bit of the actual history of why we even have tarot cards, please? Because a lot of people don't actually know.
Well, once again, Horowitz has got a good video out there on tarot cards. But for the most part, you know, it actually started as a game in Italy. And I think that it was a resource. And someone was smart enough to look at the game, which is an imagination, a way to relate to each other. In a game, whether it's Monopoly or any game you're playing, you're just relating to a group of people and having it. And someone saw greater potential into that, right? So then they started looking at the characteristics and what they meant. So just like we could look at the characteristics of what a king is, or what a president is, or what a governess is, or what a doctor is, right? They have a stigma or an idea or a picture around them. And so they just took those pictures and they felt that if you could relate, meditate, look at that picture, look at the story, you could start to integrate some of those ideas in your potential in that direction. If you get to know a doctor, you get past the stigma of thinking that they're always know everything, because they're just a person. So then you have a better relationship with a doctor. Then if a doctor tells you something, it makes sense to get a second opinion because they're just human, right? All those things was just simply getting the idea. For such a long time, there were rulers and kings, people had ultimate power. And so there was a need for a common person to be able to see that they had a king in them, that they had a queen in them, that they had a joker in them, that they had an ability for abundance in them. They had that somewhere in them. It might not have been in the world, but they would find a way to resource that. And so I think that's the reason that they started using them. They would use them. I had a lady one time that came, I was at somewhere at somebody's fair at a bookstore. And so I was doing readings. They'd asked me to do some readings. And so I had a lady come over and she sat down and she said, I want a tarot reading. And I said, oh, okay. I said, you got your own deck there? And she said, yeah, I do. Can you do with that deck? I said, yeah. And I said, I got some paper here. So I took a piece of paper and I wrote down the tower card and a king, and maybe a pentacle or something. I wrote some stuff down on the paper and I turned it over and I laid it in front of her. And I said, now just take your deck and lay 3 cards out. And so she laid 3 cards out and I turned mine over and it was the 3 cards that she laid out.
Cool.
I said, okay, now do I need the cards? And she goes, how'd you do that? And I said, you didn't come here to find out how I did that. You came here to get a reading. Let's get all this stuff out of the way, right? So then I started talking to her about these potentials and she was in tears. It was really interesting because she had been seeing intuitives after intuitive after intuitive, trying to find out why her life wasn't going right. And I said, you need to walk away from what you're trying to do and do something different. You're fighting it up. Come on, you're fighting an uphill battle. You're trying to make something happen. Lose the picture, do something different. Ingratiate yourself, find something, lose the idea that you're going to be some famous singer or something. Go in a different direction. Look at different options, right? So you can find joy in who you are. It was kind of amazing. She's just like, I have no idea what happened from there. But it was like, I just remember that she was so tied up on the cards. There's nothing wrong with them. I've got probably a dozen decks of cards. I've, done lots of them. We used the big cards and colored it because I felt when you were coloring it, you had an active relationship with whatever that symbol meant, right? But it doesn't matter. You close your eyes and you see a picture that's just a symbol, right? So if you can take that picture and fix it and change it and amend it, now you have an influence, right? And so therefore, when you get a counseling from someone and they see a picture and you're trapped and they free you up, it made a big difference, right? I don't know how many people I had possessed and they got a picture, they're captured somewhere and you let them escape from that capture. And next thing you know, they're out of it, right? It's just all.
It's amazing. And I know this is a really vulnerable story for me in my life. But again, just to, I'm okay with being vulnerable because I know it also helps people to relate as well.
Right.
But I told this story once before and whatever, there's over 100 videos on my channel now, but I'll never forget my whole life. Like I told you about the haunting and the demonics and the bad energy in my house and the terrible fight with the serial killer across the road. It was just so much. And I remember when I first met you, I sat in front of you. So you were going to take a look at my energy. And you pretty much told me that I was on the verge of full possession. And it was one of the most terrifying things anyone's ever said. Like I was instantly pissed off at you. Then I was terrified. Then I was so grateful for you. And then I was like, oh my God, get him out. Like and you just said, it's fine. You said, relax, take a breath. And you said, I'm gonna throw them into an energy bubble and I'm gonna hit mute so they can shut up. You said, because they're really noisy. And then you said, it's okay, your energy field is used to them being there. So we're just gonna drag them around for a couple of weeks and they're gonna start dissipating.
Right.
And they did, and it's like, here's an example of another reason why I'm sharing that story, because there are people that look at people like me, people like you, like on YouTube or wherever, and they get this idea that we are special, super special, above them, more advanced, more academic, whatever, celebrity, all that nonsense. And they couldn't imagine somebody admitting they were on the verge of complete and utter possession. Because they separate, right? What they don't realize is that more than half of the people that they admire as celebrities have all kinds of contracts with demonics. And a lot of them are conscious. And a lot of them sold their souls, mate. There ain't no one in there but the dark. You know what I mean? So where we're at on this time of the planet right now, there's so much fear and terror in people. And so this broadcast that you and I are doing is very deliberately loving, weaving in and out, just layering out this tapestry of potential, this information and intel on request, demand, energy. How do I look at that? How do I gently break that down? Coming to a close. I mean, you and I could just keep going for hours. It's so brilliant.
Right.
But what would you like to end with?
For the most part, I think people have to take and spend a moment sitting with where their challenges are and take a look at why do they have a challenge? It's just a good question to ask to yourself. Why am I having a challenge? Do I need to go around something? Do I need to go a different way? Do I need to let this all go? Do I not be obsessed by this? Can I get to a bigger picture? Can I get to something larger? Sometimes the simplest thing in the world is just to go around an obstacle, right? It's just real simple. I have people that bang their head against the wall. I'm going to learn this. And I'm going, I did some acting one time in high school and college plays. And they said, Chris, you do a really good job, but you don't follow the lines. You just change them. And I said, yeah, I just changed them because I didn't like it. So I just changed it. They say, you can't do that. I said, yeah, I can. I just did. Right. So it wasn't natural to me. Right. I was doing arsenic and old lace one time. I was supposed to be able to burn your finger and be able to curse or say something in German. And I burned my finger and said, shit. And they said, cut. You're not supposed to say shit. Burn your finger. You say shit. I don't know what it is in German.
Scheiße. It's scheiße.
Yes. Okay. So anyway, they let me say shit. It was good. So I decided acting wasn't my field because, following a script, I'm not very good at. When someone writes something down for me and then they want me to follow it, no, I'm not very good at that. But if I can imagine something, then I can kind of work my way through it. And that's what we're really good at doing. So when somebody sits in front of us, we don't say, hey, this is what you need. We say, hey, let's take a look. Let's see what we can do with this here. Let's see how we can navigate through this. And I think that's really, really important to know that there's a way. There's always a way. The people who think they got it all together are the people that don't care about anyone else because they're so attentive to themselves, they run over everybody, right? So at some point in time, when you're the only person, king in the mountain is a very lonely place to be, right? And it's an ongoing game where you've got to fight constantly to be the king of the mountain. So I can remember first grade, I learned in spelling bees, if you get up and spell a word correct, then you got to stand up and they give you another and give you another. I got it where you get up and they give you a simple word and you say, oh, I don't know it. And they sit down and you don't have to do any of it anymore. So I just failed every spelling bee.
Oh my God.
Why should I abuse myself, right? They're sitting up there sweating because they're got to do the next word. I didn't have to do anything. So I guess ever since first grade, at least all my life, I was always looking at like, why do it the hard way, right? Let's find an easier way to do this. We've got to get through life. This has got to be fun. Let's have an adventure. Let's find a simple way. Let's make it all work, right? Doesn't matter what the story is. Put it all together, make it work, right? That's it. And so there's a lot of benefit in it. So we've all bounced over speed bumps, and we all get our way through them. And I always call an obstacle a speed bump. That's kind of like you just go over it, right? You might have to slow down, but you definitely go over it. That's it. And so that's move forward in life. Find a way. If you're running into something, you find nothing, talk to someone. Get hold of this lady here. Find some of the solutions or find some inspiration from somebody. Read a book, do something so that you can start to unwind and find a different way to go, right? And so it's just, life is just an opportunity. You just kind of look for the opportunity. It's simply just moving forward. There's no demands out there. It's just a request. You just ask permission and you say, okay, can't go that way. I'll go this way. So go that way. That's it, right? Not a problem. Piece of cake. You just find it. There we go.
Brilliant.
So this is fun. I don't know what trouble we'll get into, but I'll be back in August. So keep me toasted, and we'll find something. Who knows what my journeys will bring. I'm going to look at some people that are conditioning water. I think we're going to have a lot more problems with water. So I'm trying to get ahead of the curve and looking at filters and different things that are new technology. And so anyway, who knows where that'll take, but that's what I'm going to be doing. Brilliant. As well as counseling a few people.
I love it. Excellent. Thank you for everything that you do. And thanks for being in service and helping our native brothers and sisters You know, because, you know, we need people like you and the blessing our beautiful
But
planet.
this has been fun. So
Definitely,
thank you very much.
definitely. All right. Thank you, sir. Dr. Chris Lemmon, the very right Reverend Dr. Chris Lemmon. You are a scholar
Thank you.
and a beautiful being. And I'm just so proud to bring you on my small but mighty channel. And to the rest of you guys out there, thank you so much for spending time, sharing time. And please rewatch this if you feel something you want to do, because there are so many nuggets, so many little nuggets and stories that you can apply to yourself, you know, without going into fear, but just kind of something to play with, you know, energetically to play with, because we need more play in this cray space that we're in right now. So I send you my love, and I'll see you soon.